Hello, everyone. Sorry, we were having a little chat here. So thank you so much for coming out this afternoon to Moira Sullivan's Thesis Defense. So we're doing this hybrid. Dr. Adam Heinrich and I are both here in person with Moira on the beautiful campus of Monmouth University. And to all of you out there zooming in, thank you for joining us. Our presentation is titled Over Here, the Archaeology of U.S. Army General Hospital No. 3 in Colonia, New Jersey, from 1918 to 1919. It's a great project that had a significant community component. What we'll do, and this is typical for our thesis defenses, is Moira will speak about her project for 15 or 20 minutes, and then we'll have kind of a question and answer period, probably another 15 minutes or so. All of you on Zoom are welcome to ask questions. Why don't we do Zoom questions through the chat feature, because that makes it just a little bit easier to manage. And after we exhaust our questions, and exhaust Moira too, Dr. Heinrich and I we will meet and talk briefly, and then we'll have kind of some concluding remarks. So, with that said, let me hand over the microphone and the PowerPoint to Moira Sullivan.
Thank you. Okay, so the United States General Hospital No. 3 was a 200-acre, 1,000-bed World War I hospital located in Colonia, New Jersey, that was constructed in 1918 and then demolished in late 1919. And after that, it was empty field for a while before becoming a residential neighborhood sometime between 1950 and 1965. This project was undertaken to gain an understanding of what remains of the hospital archaeologically, and it was accomplished by studying the physical relationship between the hospital building's past locations and the modern landscape, and by exploring the material evidence for the hospital through both above and below ground archaeology. So World War I, a brief history, was an international conflict that lasted 5 years, beginning in August 1914 and ending with the Treaty of Versailles in 1919. During the war, technology improved a lot, especially weapons technology. But as weapons technology improved, the strategies used by armies tended to take a lot longer, which led to a lot of casualties. In fact, World War I was the first war where the number of deaths from wounds was greater than the number of deaths from disease. According to the U.S. War Department, a total of 4,355,000 American forces were mobilized, and of these, 323,018 became casualties, and of those casualties, 204,002 were wounded. So new surgical techniques were needed to respond to the large number of casualties that were coming back from the war, and one technique that saw widespread use on both sides of the war, which was new at the time, was bone grafting. And bone grafting was invented by a Dr. Fred Albee, who was born on the 13th of April in 1876 in Alma, Maine. He lived and grew up on a farm where he helped his grandfather to graft apple tree limbs onto new trees, and using this experience when he became a professional surgeon, he developed bone grafting. The first bone grafting operation ever done for the cure of a disease was successfully performed by Albee in the fall of 1906 for a man named Morris Noonan, who was a policeman who had been retired from active service due to osteoarthritis. When the United States entered World War I in 1917, the U.S. Surgeon General, William C. Gorgas, surveyed the Army hospitals that existed at the time. There were only 140, and they only had 9,530 available beds, and most of those were only equipped for minor ailments. They needed more beds and better equipment for the types of wounds that would be coming back in. So, the U.S. Congress appropriated funds for the construction of more military hospitals. Around that time, Dr. Albee received orders to report to Washington because they wanted him to be at a military hospital in Indiana. And on the train to New York, he met a friend of his, Charles D. Freeman, who lived in Colonia at the time and owned about 300 acres of land there. When Albee told him what he was doing, Freeman was like, "Why are you going to a hospital in Indiana when we need people here near the port of entry in New York. Albee said that there wasn't any hospital near New York, and Freeman said, well then build one, take my land and build one. When Albee reported to Washington, he learned that his assignment to Indianapolis was in error, so instead he presented Freeman's proposition to Surgeon General Gorgas, who advised him to make a formal application for Army Reconstruction Hospital No. 3. The plan was approved with a change from a 500-bed reconstruction hospital to a 2,000-bed general hospital. Construction began in February of 1819, and it was ready to receive patients by June 1919. The services that the hospital offered include physical healing and physical therapy, as well as neurological services, educational and vocational rehabilitation, and occupational therapy, which aided patients' healing by simultaneously taking their minds off their troubles and using craftwork as a form of physical therapy for damaged or amputated hands, and a curative workshop, which provided patients with rehabilitative work to help prepare them and act as a bridge from prolonged hospitalization back to an active life and employment. There was also an active social scene at the hospital, which included sports teams, dances, and field days, among other events. In the spring of 1919, General Hospital No. 3 received a general order from the Surgeon General office to dismiss half its professional staff. At the time, this was not ideal because they still had a lot of patients that needed major care, and moving them would have been rather risky for their health. So instead, Albee asked for and received a reprieve of that order until October, when they were told to close for good, at which point they were able to do so with better safety for their patients. After the hospital was closed, all of the buildings were either razed or sold to be transported elsewhere. One example of this being the nurses' quarters, which became the first iteration of St. Cecilia's Church in Colonia. And major concrete foundations were still visible in the woods in the Colonia neighborhood as recently as 1965, and while fewer in number, some foundations still stand today. For this project, the methods, despite the site being just over 100 years old, there's very little information publicly available at the site. So the purpose of this project was to discover its history and significance and how much of it still remains. Local historian Debbie Cockrow was able to provide maps, photographs, newspapers, and other primary documentation from the hospital. Archaeological methods included creating georeferenced overlay maps in Esri's ArcMap 10.8.1, surveying above-ground structural remains, analyzing artifacts previously found by homeowners, and metal detecting properties containing select hospital features such as the wards, the laboratory, the physical therapy, the curative shops, the nurses' quarters, the laundry, the commissary, and the guardhouse. And this is the map that was used for the majority of the project of the buildings from the hospital overlaid on the modern residential features. To gather information on the surviving structures, there was a survey of the hospital site conducted by myself, Richard Byte, and Dan D'Arcy, the president of the Historical Association of Woodbridge Township, who led the group to see the features that he was aware of. Structures that were found were photographed, and the locations of sewage-related features were recorded using a Garmin GPS map 645. Those were also used to create a map of the GPS points for the standing structures of the hospital that still remained that we found. Metal detecting was done by identifying 10 addresses whose properties were associated with hospital buildings that we believed would have archaeological potential, and letters were sent to the residents asking for permission. We got permission to metal detect at 70 Guernsey Lane, 51 Guernsey Lane, 77 Meredith Road, 1 Dorset Road, and 120 Midwood Way. So that's cool. So that's here, 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 and here. Metal detecting at 70 Guernsey Lane took place in the front yard. Excavators worked in groups of 2 with a tape measure used to create a 130-foot baseline across the front of the yard. And the metal detection teams working in transects spaced 20 feet apart. Stratigraphy was recorded for a buried egg horizon found 30 feet around the house that was representative of modern disturbance from construction. Stay just a second. The metal detecting at 51 Guernsey Lane was done in the backyard on one side of the house to focus on the areas near the hospital's laboratory and physical therapy buildings. Excavations didn't move past the topsoil, so stratigraphy was not recorded. Metal detection at 77 Meredith Road was more sampling than anything else due to the size of the crew, and but we still managed to take a good sample of the yard near the curative workshop buildings, and stratigraphy was not recorded at this site either. Metal detecting at 1 Dorset Road was in the backyard near the area that appeared to be between the halls of the nurses' quarters. Excavations did not move past topsoil, so stratigraphy was not recorded at this site as well. Metal detection at 120 Midwood Way was conducted in the front yard and focused on the areas around the hospital's laundry and commissary buildings, and stratigraphy was recorded for a feature found on this property. The tools and materials used include metal detectors, pin flags, and pin pointers, as well as spades to dig up the hit. Non-metal artifacts were kept along with the metal artifacts, and artifacts found were recorded using a Microsoft Excel spreadsheet. A Trimble was used to record the GPS coordinates for the artifacts from 70 Guernsey Lane and 51 Guernsey Lane, but troubleshooting issues with the Trimble and Trimble Connect meant that we couldn't recall that GPS information. We lost it, and I wasn't able to use it to create a map. But the Garmin GPS was used to record the coordinates for the other addresses, and those GPS coordinates we were able to keep, and a map was created of those artifact points. And I think, yeah, that's a map of the hospital's surviving structures that were found during the survey, including the sewage line over a ravine here down to the septic tank, the railroad track supports which are next to the power line, some part of a guardhouse structure, and the laundry foundations. So from the beginning of this project, since we knew it would be, from the beginning of this project, it was clear that there would have to be some element of community involvement, since it's a neighborhood and people live there, and we were digging in people's front and backyards. So it was crucial to make sure that they knew about the project and that we got permission to be in their yards. Additionally, it was important to me that they knew what we were finding, because it's their local history, and they deserve to know their local history. So outreach was performed in the letters that were sent asking for permission to metal detect, and in 2 Facebook posts that were made, the first informing the public of this project and asking for permission to study any artifacts that they had already found, and the second to sort of give an update on the progress of the project. In addition, the Historical Association of Woodbridge Township is planning a presentation on General Hospital Number 3, which will include this project, and based on the interest in the community expressed in the comments on one of those Facebook posts, we're currently in the planning stages of having maybe a presentation of this project at the Island branch of the Woodbridge Library. So for the results, for the above ground structures, there's the map. Multiple structures were found, including the septic tank foundations, the sewage line stanchions and trestles, sewage collection chambers, the laundry foundations, supports for the railroad tracks over the ravine to the powerhouse, and a concrete element from the hospital guardhouse and the Hawkhurst house. The railroad track supports are near the powerhouse, and the powerhouse is likely the building that Dr. Albee referred to in his book as the heating house that used 65 tons of coal a day, and the train that ran near the powerhouse likely brought in the coal from outside for the powerhouse to use. And the Hawkhurst house was Charles Freeman's his residence. It was where he lived, and it was reserved by the owner when the Army was renting out his land when the hospital stood here. So that house was used to entertain important guests while the hospital was in operation. A greater number of individual standing structural remains are found in and near the ravine, where there's been significantly less construction development since the hospital was abandoned, which isn't very surprising, because often when there were concrete structures in people's yards, they would be removed for safety reasons or for gardening reasons. Artifacts were found previously by homeowners and lent to this project for study, and quite a few of them are likely associated with the hospital. This includes a rectangular iron piece with a circular hole in the middle that may have been from a form of prefabrication that could have been used for constructing the hospital. There's also a 6-lever push key iron padlock, 2 horseshoes, a leather orthopedic brace with iron fasteners and the words Wilson and 2 imprinted on it, and 3 glass bottles, one of which is an amber Paul Jones whiskey bottle dated 1908. The second is a small, clear, cylindrical bottle with the words Pyrex 52 embossed on the bottom. And the third is likely a perfume or other personal sort of object. It's got the letter, I think, 6 imprinted on the bottom of it. Next. Yeah. So a total of 275 artifacts were found at all 5 properties. I've had them grouped into 5 categories: construction or hardware artifacts, utility artifacts, household artifacts, personal artifacts, and unidentified or uncategorized artifacts. The artifacts found at 70 Guernsey Lane, there were a total of 116 at that site, including roofing nails and tar roofing material, and another iron rectangle with a hole in the middle that may have been from prefabricated construction. At 51 Guernsey Lane, 34 artifacts were found, including another iron square with a hole in the middle, perhaps from prefabricated construction, 3 nail tacks, possibly for furniture or upholstery, a cabinet pull, a fork, seen here, a tube of lipstick, which is similar in design, though not identical to a tube found in the 1918 edition of the Sears and Roebuck's company catalog. 23 artifacts were found at 77 Meredith Road. This includes a grommet, a slide buckle, another fastener, and 2 bronze bars, one with gouges and another with a circular indent in it. Metal detection at 1 Dorset Road found 41 artifacts, including a terracotta fragment, possibly from a flower pot, a ceramic doorknob, and a copper ring that might be jewelry. Metal detection at 120 Midwood Way found 61 artifacts, including coal, 22 fragments of a porcelain toilet, and iron fragments that might be from a kettle. This is also where we found our project's first and only feature, Feature 1, which is likely a demolition pit from when the hospital was decommissioned. 31 of the artifacts found at this property came from this feature, including the porcelain toilet fragments, a piece of brick with mortar on it, 4 wire-drawn nails, toilet seat liner, glass, slag, and an unidentified piece of iron. The base piece of the porcelain toilet has a maker's mark that identifies its maker as the Belmark Pottery Company of Trenton, New Jersey, and this pottery company was in operation from 1893 to 1911 and made sanitary ware and plumbing fixtures. Construction and hardware artifacts were the most common artifact type found at this site. They were found at every property and were usually the largest portion of artifacts found at every property, but they were most common at 70 Guernsey Lane, which is the property associated with the hospital's wards. Utility artifacts were also found everywhere, though their age range varied fairly wildly. There were ceramic pipe pieces that were pretty curly from the hospital, and there were also there was one piece of heavy utility piping that had a Burnco Company ceiling donut on it, and those date to at the earliest 1964. Yeah, 1964. The household artifacts were found everywhere, but then not always as identifiable. Small pieces of glass, a couple pieces of ceramic. Some are artifacts that may have been used every day at the hospital, such as a cabinet pull or a doorknob. Personal artifacts were not found everywhere, but they were most common at 77 Meredith Road and 51 Guernsey Lanes. Those are the properties closest to the curative shops and the patient's mess. And these artifacts may be more common there because of those buildings being hubs for hospital activities and the use of material objects that would have been happening at those buildings. For example, the fork found at 51 Guernsey Lane being fairly close to where the mess hall would have been. Based on the survey done at General Hospital Number 3, the entire site appears to be sensitive for construction, and utility remains both modern and from the hospital. The entire area is also sensitive for household remains from the hospital, with the center block of the hospital site between Guernsey Lane and Midwood Way. And hold on a second. So here, this block here, being especially sensitive, and this block here and this area here being the most sensitive for personal artifacts. A lot of the artifacts can be informative of the activities around the site, and especially around the places where they were found. For example, at 77 Meredith Road, the small fasteners likely used for fabric that were found in the bronze bars may have been raw materials used at the curative shops. And a small toy wheel, which was found at 99 Meredith Road, while somewhat distant from the curative shops, may still have been from there. Artifacts found at 1 Dorset Road, where the nurses' quarters is, includes the terracotta piece and the copper ring, which might be jewelry, which could have been belongings that were of the nurses. At 51 Guernsey Lane, the leather orthopedic brace was found, which is pretty strongly associated with the physical therapy building and could have been used for connecting like a prosthetic limb. That's also where the fork was found, and you can see with the warping on the map, the patient's mess isn't terribly far from 51 Guernsey Lane. The artifacts found at 120 Midwood Way may be associated with any of these buildings, but this is the site where most of the coal from this project was found, and that's likely associated with the laundry. A laboratory bottle is a little bit distant from where the laboratory would be, but that could be a result of it being lost, or it could be a result of the demolition process. The other two bottles found there, the perfume bottle and the whiskey bottle, could be from the commissary. The whiskey bottle could also be confiscated from someone at the guardhouse. The kettle fragments were also found at 120 Midwood Way, and that's not too terribly distant from the kitchen, so it could have been a kettle from the hospital kitchen. The feature, the demolition pit, could represent the demolition process of the hospital, as it contains a pretty wide variety of things, including nails, porcelain toilet fragments, and a brick. After the hospital was demolished, the land was left as an empty field, and with the artifacts in Feature 1 being up to 2 feet deep, it's possible that during demolition, some debris was pushed into holes and intentionally or unintentionally buried. So, back. The archaeology of this site, as a World War I site, it's connected to the present. It's very connected to the present, and it's like that for all World War I sites, because there's a quote I found by someone who describes Great War archaeology as a social archaeology that excavates people's lives and that can take place in their own homes, museums, car boot sales, on the internet, and in public and private collections of war memorabilia, which is very clear how that applies to this project being literally something that we're digging up people's yards for. Now, most of the archaeology that's done for World War I sites is done in Europe on trenches and other battlefields, but there has actually been work on hospital sites in America. I found in 2001 in California, Walter Enterprises undertook an archaeological test investigation of the Camp Kearney Hospital dump site, which is located in the western portion of the modern-day Marine Corps Air Station, Miramar, San Diego, California. The hospital was part of an Army base there, an Army training camp. It was a 60-acre complex within that camp, Camp Kearney, which was an Army World War I Army training camp that operated from 1917 to 1922. Artifacts similar to those found at General Hospital No. 3 were found at the Camp Kearney site, including a whiskey bottle, light bulb elements, fragments of a ceramic toilet, actually, and iron pipe segments. Yeah, funny, that's the connecting artifact. Most of the artifacts found at the Camp Kearney Hospital dump site were glass or ceramic, and were more intact than those found at General Hospital No. 3, which is likely due to the comparative nature of the sites and the field methods. The site at Camp Kearney is described in their report as a, quote, dense and discrete refuse deposit, while the General Hospital No. 3 is encompassing the entire site. And the only noted disturbance from the Camp Kearney site was road construction that had taken place sometime before 1928. And the field methodology for the Camp Kearney site was surface collection from a road surface below the dump. So they had a lot less metal artifacts than this project, which used metal detecting primarily. But the Walter Enterprise test investigation at Camp Kearney concluded that the Camp Kearney Hospital dump site is eligible for nomination to the National Register of Historic Places under Criterion D. So while General Hospital No. 3 isn't eligible under Criterion D because of the massive residential construction that's taken place on this site since the hospital closed, the conclusion at the Camp Kearney site highlights the importance of World War I hospital sites like that and General Hospital No. 3, especially in the United States. So this is, it's a really interesting site, and this is the first work that's been done on it, and there's still so much more work that can be done on it. Given the likelihood of additional remains, and there's a very high likelihood that there are additional remains from the hospital, additional studies on the site are recommended, and I think additional studies on the site would be best served by the investigators and would best serve the people hoping to learn about the site if they're undertaken with controlled methodology and maybe led by professional archaeologists. A group that might be able to help with that would be the New Jersey Historic Preservation Office, which I think would probably be interested in this site anyway, since it is such a huge part of New Jersey history, and one that's so relatively little known. Additionally, because the scope of this project is so large and there is so much more to learn about it, there's a lot of potential for future academic study. There's a lot of avenues you could go down, a lot of different things about the site you could study. Additionally, the local community should continue to be involved in any future studies done here. It's their local history, and they've repeatedly shown how interested they are in learning about it. So they should continue to be involved. So thank you for coming, and thank you especially to Debbie Cockrow and Dan D'Arcy of the Historical Association of Woodbridge Township. Without them, this project would probably not have come up at all. So.
Thank you. Right, so good presentation. So are you good for a couple of questions? I have a lot of questions.
You want to present your chat first?
Yeah, should we?
We can get into water first.
Okay. Hang in there. And
Our phone's away.
Thank you, Victoria.
all right. Okay, so if we get other questions, we want to jump in. Why don't you jump in?
So overall, this is awesome. All aspects of it were really admirable. So obviously I wasn't out in the field with you every time you were out there, but seeing your field management skills develop and you practiced was really cool. And then obviously the hard work you put in here in the lab and the research, obviously finding when these artifacts date and what they were, and obviously the written work was really good too. So it was all really cool. So at the end though, you said you don't think this place would qualify under criterion D. So were you in Doc White's CRM practicum class?
No, because I was working in CRM when he was having a conference.
I don't really think people just weren't sure he's recruiting the class.
No, they were there.
Play us out.
They did the first day of excavations. Was a class period.
Okay. Because my question was going to be like, so if you were to nominate the hospital to the National Register of Historic Places, what argument could you make? So you don't think it would qualify for D?
Yeah.
But kind of, so if you took the class, I'd be like, why keep teaching this stuff? So the things that would allow for an archaeological site to qualify would be things like integrity, or maybe association with important things. You're not just important people, important events, important technology.
Yeah.
So what argument do you think you can make for this site to be part of the historic preservation, National Register of Historic Places?
Honestly, probably all of those, because Dr. Albee was such an important person in medical history, and this site was so important for the development of the medical techniques, bone grafting, also more holistic rehabilitation techniques. The problem with trying to get it nominated for the list under criterion D is that it requires that it's not been developed. It's more structurally, it retains its integrity, and it's a neighborhood.
I think you could make an argument for integrity, because integrity means things like stratigraphy. It means things like features, or even just discrete deposits, or not kind of thing in some cases. And I think you have that here, because obviously you have some standing structure, like the remainings of the ruins of them. You have feature, at least one. And you kind of, I would imagine you can make an argument there's quite a lot more of that out there. Just that, the feature was accidentally found in any sense because of metal protection. But maybe if you followed more traditional kinds of survey techniques, you can find a lot more. Linear excavations or whatever else. I think there's probably quite a lot out there. Obviously, it's really intensive in built space.
Yeah.
So I think you could make an argument that it qualifies under D as well. But again, the fact that you have stratigraphy, the fact that you have features, and you have the nice discrete period of time this was used, it's not really heavily bumped up, with the development. Which alone was surprising, because nowadays when you see how development, they basically you're a whole entire site. Yeah, I don't know when it started, but it kills me now when you think about something like this. It's like, even with these are big houses, it's pretty well developed, but there's so much left there for you to find for the hospital, which would only for half a year. It's really weird. Anyway.
So Rick, good, fabulous presentation, great project, great community involvement, great partners, you know, Dan and Debbie and everybody else who came out and helped. A lot of, I was amazed that sort of just folks being like, yeah, you can come to this, this is great. And the first day we were there, I think the gentleman drove down the road and said to us, like, you know, welcome to hospital number 3. Like, everybody was into it. The mayor's participation. In terms of National Register, so I was part of I heard a recent discussion where I think they were thinking with National Register districts, and I'm not suggesting you do a National Register application here, but I think they're going to modify the language in the sense that you don't need like a building to be individually eligible for a whole district to come on. You do have a lot of features, so I mean I think it's super important. It's a really important site. I mean they have a historical marker, thank goodness, but it's underappreciated.
It's just sort of more like philosophical in a sense, but sort of, what's the discussion about this place after it's closed? Like, are people, like, so nowadays we're so concerned about things like government waste and military expenditure. Like, this seems like a really glaring example of that. It's like they went through the next effort to build this thing. It's like, it's not even operating for a year. And like, they demolished it. When it seems to be there's still need because the war's still going on. Like, the war doesn't end.
No, the war wasn't going on. In fact, for most of its operation, the fighting was technically over.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, it opened in, like, July 1818, and 1918. And within a couple months, the fighting was over, even if armistice wasn't signed yet. Yeah, the signing of the armistice was in 1919, before the hospital was decommissioned, but I think for a lot of its operation, because the United States entered the war in 1917, but the hospital opened in 1918, so for a lot of that time, there was like that period when the fighting ended and when armistice was signed. There was like a period where the war wasn't technically over, but no one was fighting. Yeah.
Amazing how quickly it goes on. The amount of work that went into this, literally an army had to come in and put it together.
Yeah, there's that, but there's also like when the U.S. military does stuff. Speaking as a dependent, they can tend to be a little cheap sometimes, and you might be able to see that in the toilet that they used, dating from like, it's probably like back lot. The people that made it have already closed down shop. They've just got it in a warehouse somewhere, and like, oh, we haven't used this yet. You have to throw it in the hospital. But it was all wooden construction, and it wasn't like cheap, obviously. But it would have been thrown up pretty quickly, and was probably not meant for long-term use in the first place. So a lot of the stuff that they used to make it probably wouldn't have been able to be reused. I would imagine.
The photos just it's so finished.
Yeah.
Operating rooms.
Yeah, the like walkways for accessibility. Yeah, it was.
Is it? I mean, it seems really sort of ahead of its time in the sense that it's not just first of all bone graft. The fact that they're doing bone grafts in 1918 blows me away. And that people are like having good outcomes and all of that. But that they also have like occupational therapy and all these rehabilitative services that we think of today with sort of more like holistic medicine. I mean, the place feels very cutting edge. Do you think that was the case? Or?
Yeah, it was definitely cutting edge. I think some of the therapy bits, maybe the curative workshop was based on a model for a hospital that had that was up in Britain, but it was very new. These were like the first people doing that sort of thing, and things like shell shock were understood, but maybe it wasn't as much of a focus to actually be treating that, and also providing educational services to make sure that people would be able to get jobs or just could have fun, learn something new, maybe go into a career that they wouldn't have been able to otherwise. Dr. Elby's book actually has anecdotes of men who were like farmers or mechanics who weren't very happy before the war with those jobs, but who ended up getting into painting and art while they were at the hospital and ended up doing that instead and were very happy with it.
What happens when the hospital closes? I don't know enough about the history of the VAs. My wife worked at a VA hospital that was constructed in the very early 30s. So it feels like there's a gap between the VA hospital where it's coming online and this place closing. You know what happens with the fellows who are displaced to maybe some service?
They would have been sent on. This hospital did provide somewhat long-term care, but it was also like a pit stop sort of thing. Dr. Albee mentioned that it would have been something like a pit stop. They would have either been discharged if they were well enough to be discharged, or they would have been sent to more long-term care hospitals.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. Julia, did the people who previously found artifacts know that they may have been associated with the hospital? That's a good question. Some of them did, I think. The man at 51 Guernsey Lane, Vito, he's big on the history of the hospital. I think he knew what he had. He's the one that had the brace. I don't know if the guy that lives at 120 Midwood Way, he knew they were like old like glass bottles, which are pretty cool collector's items. But I don't know if he knew about the hospital. Site of the cobbler. The leather pieces. Oh, the cobbler. The cobbler would have been part of the curative workshops, I think. The curative or the school cobbling was one of the things that they did.
So if you were laying out a plan, like working with the community members in Fulton, Woodbridge, and you were to say like, here are, I don't know, 2 or 3 things that I'd very much like to do, or that I think deserve further investigation. Are there things out there that you think would be interesting to look at?
Yeah, I think that center block, I would want to take a closer look at that in the area around the school and the curative workshops. It seems like there's a lot of potential for good, informative artifacts.
Especially like the mess is the mess, right? It's food, you find food stuff all over the place. Like maybe you talk about like military rationing or provisioning or something like that. But yeah, the curative stuff, the craft stuff, all the kind of therapeutic stuff would be really interesting.
Yeah, and
so that's probably a little less well understood, especially archaeologically.
What I would love to know, and that's supposed to work. What I would love to know, and what wasn't possible to know with the way that this was structured, this project was structured, is if there are any smaller artifacts left over from the curative workshop in the hospital that got lost. For example, they did jewelry making. It's possible that there are like beadwork out there. If beads had been dropped or lost or a package tore or something. And that's not the kind of thing that you would find with metal detection. Those artifacts are really small and might not be metal. So it's that sort of thing I think would be really interesting to see if you're able to open up actual units or do more intensive work on this site.
The stuff that draws my attention is the incidental stuff you found one metal coming, like the big chunk of coal. I was like, this really speaks to like, trainloads of coal coming in.
Yeah.
And being shipped to different parts to heat things up.
Yeah, there was
a toilet seat, right? Like, there are incidental finds because they have to be pure metal. So yeah, you're right. Like, what is out there that wasn't found with the current methodology? That would be really kind of interesting and informative.
Do we know if, presumably some patients passed away. I think they had a pretty high success rate. Do we know if they went where they were they interned in Patuxent or Woodbridge, or did they go to a military cemetery someplace like New York City?
I don't know. I don't think I ever saw it mentioned. It's possible that already being back in the United States, they would have just been returned to their families.
We're in the period of the bombing by this community, so it could happen. Okay. Rosedale, wasn't anybody left?
Yeah, they're not that far. There's World War I.
There's one just like a little plot of land in there for
When we're all white cemetery. Anything really surprising about the project that when you went into it, like, did things end up different than your preconceptions, or it was like, no, this is kind of what I thought we would have?
I was worried that I wouldn't get a lot of, I either wouldn't get a good reception from the community, or I wouldn't get like anything at all. Nobody would pay any attention. And then that there wouldn't be anything there, that we wouldn't find anything because it has been so heavily developed on. Both of those things turned out to be untrue. The community was amazing. They're very cool, very nice, and very interested in the project, and there was stuff there.
Yeah. You had mentioned there's plans to do presentations to the local community.
Mm-hmm.
Like, one of the things I would emphasize is that obviously if they're going to continue to live there, they're going to garden, they're going to dig a pool, whatever it is. If they come across stuff, like emphasize the recording. Like, save this stuff. I don't know if Dan or others want to retain it, but the homeowners don't keep it, but like, you record where it was and provide that information to the historical society so that way it's saved.
Yeah. Yeah.
What about, actually, I didn't put it. Actually, I do have one. The GIS work you did.
Mm-hmm.
So would this project have been possible without the GIS work, or the GIS work really enables?
It would have been really difficult. It wouldn't have looked as good if I didn't have the artifact placement maps or the structures maps. But the map of the hospital buildings overlaid on the modern buildings really informed where I looked to do the most investigation. And it informed what part of the yards we dug in some places. So it wouldn't have been impossible, but I would have been shooting blind. I would have been basically saying, oh, let's try over here, or let's try over there, without knowing what might have actually been on those properties, if anything was there at all. And in the end, when doing the analysis of the artifacts, I wouldn't have been able to connect them back to the buildings that they were found near.